My name's Bill Snyder, and I was actually born in Plymouth in a house. And when I was 5 years old, we moved to Inwood. I started school in Inwood. And next year we moved to Argos, and from then on I went to Argos from the second grade on. And in high school I played basketball and baseball and ran some track. And after high school I worked a year, then I went to Manchester College and got my degree in science and history and coaching, phys ed. And I got out of high school, I went to Thelma for 1 year and coached B team basketball there and a little bit of baseball. From there, the next year I went to West High for a big raise from $3,200 to $4,000. And I was at West High for 5 years. They hadn't won a ball game in 6 years, I think, and we won one ball game. We beat Monterey by 4 points. The next day we hung Doc Fod and had a party at school. And I won the crying towel that year because we were 1-19, and I told them the way I won the towel, I told them that I was upset because we were trying for a perfect record. So anyway, after being there 5 years, LaVille called up and was looking for a junior high coach, and they had insurance there, and we just had a son and had no insurance, so I moved there for a big $5,200, and I was at LaVille for 5 years and got my counseling license, went to South Bend 1 year for and counsel at a junior high school. And then Plymouth had called me I think three times and offered me a job. And I wanted to get back into coaching, so I left there and I come to Plymouth and was there the last 25 years. And I coached football, basketball, and some baseball. Whatever they needed, I tried to fill in. So that's kind of my record of where I've been and what I've been doing. I've been retired now for 22 years.
So, okay, so when you played in high school and then you went to college, is that where you met your wife? Did you meet your wife in college? Or?
Yeah, my wife in college. She was from Brimfield, Indiana, which is a town of about 200. Her dad owned the lumberyard there, frickin' Brimfield Lumber. And yeah, she was walking to church, and we never went to church after football. We would sleep in and then go to Mike's Cafe and have breakfast. But she's walking to church, and I told my buddy, pull over, let's take that young gal to church. So we took her and her friend to church, and I told her I'd pick her up at 6 o'clock the night. She said she had to study, and I showed up there, and we started going together. And then 3 years later, we got married, had a couple boys. We have a boy that's a neurosurgeon in Knoxville, Tennessee, and a boy who's a mental health counselor in Brownsburg, Indiana.
So how long have you and your wife been married?
We've been married, it'll be 58 years now.
Wow. And how did she feel about your life as a coach?
Well, she used to hold supper all the time. That was a little disgusting. But she put up with it. Our boys both played ball at LaVille. They played tennis and basketball and baseball. And so we followed them around for several years. I quit coaching high school basketball for 2 years. Then when I came back, I'd written a little book called 20 Moves. And they needed to start a 5th and 6th grade program at Plymouth. So I went back and did that for a couple years. And then John Beaker, one of our ball players, who coached 8th grade basketball, he moved on and became a principal, and I took over the 8th grade and coached it for 5 years before I retired. And I had a great time coaching the junior high kids. They were a lot of fun.
I'll bet, yeah. And they still have a lot of enthusiasm.
Yeah.
And so you ended up, did you play any sports at Manchester when you were in college, or did you?
Yeah, I played, I got cut in basketball 2 years because I was too short. And then a guard flunked out, and they asked me to come out, and then I played my last 2 years there, and I had a real good time. I was on the football team. I didn't play much, I was on the goon platoon. We learned the other team's plays, and the varsity beat us up. I did score 2 touchdowns in my whole career. And I played a couple of years of baseball, and then the last year in baseball, a guy took my place at second base, so I went over and threw the javelin and was in track the last year. So I tried a little bit of everything.
Yeah, jack of all trades.
Yeah.
And so when you, did you know you wanted to go into teaching when you went into college? Did you?
Yeah, Bob Hileman was my high school coach, and he encouraged me a lot, and I thought a lot of him, and that's the reason I wanted to coach and teach, was because of Bob Hileman. Yeah.
So what, your brother talked about him too. So what was it about his coaching that?
Well, Bob was just a real level-headed guy, and he always encouraged you. He was never irate or anything. And he used to say, if you got beat, he said, you know, it's not the worst thing that's going to happen to you. If you've done your best, that's all you can do. And I kind of felt that way as I coached. Tried to carry on some of the stuff that he taught me.
And what sports did you play for him?
For him, I played basketball and baseball and ran track. They just had one coach back in the 50s. I graduated in 54. And yeah, you didn't have 5 or 6 coaches sitting around. I don't know what they need all of them for, but I guess they do.
So, during your basketball playing days, what kind of stands out for you in your memories of those days?
Well, in high school basketball, I remember getting beat, really, by Piney Colwatch from Culver. They beat us in the sectional. The next year, my senior year, we got beat by La Paz on a last-second shot, and then they played North Judson and won that. But I always was hoping we could win a sectional, but we come close, but no cigar, so to speak. So then in college, we were only supposed to win 3 games. We ended up winning 15. We were 15-6. And we upset Ball State. They were supposed to be beat us by 20, and they kind of got in an argument playing, and we kept picking away, and we ended up beating them by 20. And when they announced it on the radio in Fort Wayne, they said, Manchester beat Ball State, said this has got to be a mistake. But it wasn't, so that was one of my highlights. But yeah, I just love sports. I tried everything, you know, and I wasn't great at anything, but I was good enough to compete. That was what I enjoyed.
Yeah. So you played football in high school too then?
No, high school, Argos didn't have football. They just had 3 sports. Then my brother, Gene, they had started soccer just before he got there, and then they started soccer, and so they had soccer added to the program, but that was about 10 years after I left high school.
Mm-hmm. I heard that the first game of soccer in Indiana was played.
Yeah, they won the state, I think, about 3 times. My nephews played on that team, the Odells, yeah. And Doug Snyder. He played on some of those teams, and yeah. It was sort of Snyder's when every Sunday we'd get together and have lunch after church, and then we'd play ball in the backyard. And so everybody, if you didn't play ball, you kind of was left out. But the boys and girls, everybody played, and we had a great time growing up in Argos.
So who would all come to the family games?
Well, it'd be everybody. It'd be, well, we call him Pooch, but Gene, he would, his family would come, and there was 4 boys and 2 girls, and everybody would show up, and we just all eat together and go out in the backyard and play kickball or softball, whatever anybody wanted to play. And I used to get the Odell boys out in my kitchen. When my boy was 1, Bill, I had a basket on the wall in the kitchen. My wife didn't like it real well, but we'd move the table back, and Don and Bill Odell would come over, and we'd play ball in the kitchen. So that's how they started. I got tapes of them when they were, like 3, 4 years old. Bill was 2, and we'd play ball right in the kitchen.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. the neighbor kid would always come over and knock on the door and ask my wife if I could come out and play. I always played with all the neighbor kids.
Did they ever have any scuffles between the kids? Like, would they get?
Yeah, Doug was the oldest, and he could run faster than the rest of them. And Bill Odell stepped on a bee one time. He was crying, and I said, "Don't cry." I said, "It'll make you run faster." So he went home and told his mom, and so the next day we had a lot of clover in our grass. She put on shoes on him. He went out and he come running back up there, and he said, "I stepped on a bee." She said, "Why'd you take your shoes off?" He says, "Because Uncle Bill said if a bee stung me, I could run faster." She come over and kind of gave me a little talking about that. Anyway, yeah.
So, finished college, and then you got your first teaching job, right? Well, tell me a little bit about that. Like,
Well, my first teaching job was at Telma, and there was only 65 kids in the high school there. And I took a job, and that job, I had a history and science and phys ed license, so I taught phys ed, I taught biology, I taught history, and I had taught health and safety. I had 4 different classes there, and I coached B-team basketball and 8th grade basketball, and I coached track at that school for a year. And I remember I walked into the class the first day, and I had my notes all ready and everything, but I kind of panicked. And I said, "Excuse me," and I walked out in the hall, got my composure, and come back in. I was only a couple of years older than those kids, you know, and when I first looked at my first class, it sort of shook me up a little bit. But I calmed down. The kid that became sheriff of Fulton County, Roy Calvert, he came in, and he had, in the old days, they had a hearing aid with a thing in their pocket and a plug in their ear, and he had one of those, and I thought he was hard of hearing. So after about a week, I went to this other boy, and I said, "When did Roy lose his hearing?" He said, "He's not hard of hearing." I said, "Well, he's got a hearing aid." "No, he's been listening to radio in your health class." So I was a slow learner. But I had a fun year there, but when I got a chance for more money, I left.
So you went from Talma, and then your next stop?
Next stop was at West High, and I was there. I was a junior high coach first, and the head coach, there's a kid named Beaver DeVault, Jim DeVault, and he used to come up to the head coach and pull on his coat all the time in the back. And the head coach said, "Don't ever do that again, I'll bust you in the mouth." And we're walking down the hall together, and Beaver pulls on his coat, and he turned around and poked him and chipped his tooth, and he lost his job. And that's how I got hired as the head coach at West High. And then I was there for, the last year I was there, I think we won like 9 or 10 games. And then the next year, West High was going to come into Plymouth. And I had an offer to go to LaVille, and that's when I left for insurance and more money, actually. I always wished I'd have stayed that last year and with the kids, because I played them as freshmen and sophomores, and then we started winning, and then I think after I left the last year, I thought we could win 11 games. And I think the guy that came in won 10, and so but I was glad for the kids, and they're still great friends with me, and still hear from them after all these years, you know.
Well, that's great. Yeah. Okay, so you moved on to LaVille, right?
Yeah, I went to LaVille,
Okay.
and they started football the year I went there. I helped with football, and I coached junior high basketball, and then when 2 years of that, and then they needed a B-team coach, and I moved up, coached the B-team at LaVille, and stayed with football and basketball there, and after 5 years, that's when I decided to go into counseling. I went to South Bend, a school called Coquillard, a little school there. And I enjoyed it quite a bit, but it didn't keep me busy enough, really. That's what I felt. And then the next year is when I came to Plymouth and was there the rest of the time. And I coached freshman basketball first and helped with football. Then later on, I moved up to the B team, and Jack Edison took over the varsity when Steve Yoder left. And Jack and I coached together, I think, for 11 years then. And then my boys started playing ball at LaVille, so I stayed with football, and I helped Nixon with baseball, and got out of basketball for about 4 years until they, well, like I said, they needed a 5th and 6th grade coach, start the program. McFerrin and I worked together on that, and that was a lot of fun. I had Michael Edison and that group, and then I had, when I went to 8th grade, I had Michael again in the 8th grade. So I really enjoyed Mike. He was a great kid, and we were pretty successful. I think in junior high we were like, well, 2 years we were undefeated. In 5th and 6th grade we were undefeated, and then Mike's year we lost 3 games. We were like 15-3, and then when I had this last group I had, Cheney and that bunch, we were undefeated. And one year we lost 1 ball game. We got beat by one of the LaPorte schools. So that was very enjoyable. After every game we went away, we would stop somewhere and go to McDonald's or something. So it was more like fun than it was work. And the kids seemed to enjoy it. Glenn Starr would take all of our tapes in junior high, and he would take all the best plays and put them together and put them to music. And then each kid would get a tape. So a lot of those kids, I still get notices from them that they watch that every once in a while, and show their kids when they played ball, you know, and that.
That's great.
So that was a lot of fun too. So that was pretty much what I done all those years. And it was very enjoyable. I love my job.
Okay, so I'll just go ahead and start at the beginning here. So they say they have boys basketball, the state championship from 81 and 82.
Yeah, well, that championship, I had those kids until they were sophomores. And Skiles was a good ball player. I got to tell you a story about him. We're playing Bremen, and we're running rotation defense. And I called timeout in the first quarter. And I said, Scott, you're not getting to the block on the back side. You got to get there. He said, I can't get there from there. I said, okay, sit down. No, anybody cannot get there. And for about a quarter and a half, he begged me to go back in. And finally I said, okay, can you get, he said, I think I can get there now. I said, okay, get back in there. I think he scored like 19 points. We ended up winning the ball game. So, yeah, I had him. And he was a kid you had to remind who was in charge sometimes. But I had a good relationship with Scott. And when he came back to the 20th reunion, why, we had a real good visit. We took some pictures together and that. But he'd been quite successful. And all those kids in that group, you know, they turned out to be doctors and so on, and teachers. And that was a real good group of kids. They done well, all of them. But yeah, I'll tell you a story about junior high. When I had Cheney in that bunch, they were undefeated. We were like 15-0, and we had 3 games, and all of a sudden they started kind of going on their own. And I went to the dime store and I bought a bunch of little horns, and we got to practice. And I said, I want you guys to stick these in your jock. And they kind of looked at me. I said, now if you do something good, you get to blow your own horn. I said, a free throw's worth 1, a 3-pointer's worth 3, and a 2-pointer's worth 2. If you steal the ball, you get 1. And I said, I'm having the same problems Jesus had here. And they looked at each other. I said, you know, the disciples wanted to know who amongst us is the greatest. And I said, so you guys blow your own horn and we'll work this out. And they all looked at each other. And I think Cheney said, we got the idea. So, but I used to give them what I called object lessons, you know. So anyway, that was one story that, yeah. I don't know if they should put this on tape, but when we were coaching football, we were over playing Manchester, and we were way ahead, and the guy kept throwing his flag for stuff, and I kind of got tired of it, so I picked the flag up and landed from me, and I blew my nose on it, handed it to him, and I got a trip to the bus out of that. And then when we were playing Warsaw at Triton. The Warsaw coach come up. It was a guy that's at Penn now, and he said, "This will be my first undefeated season." They hadn't got beat, the B team. So I went to the dressing room with the kid and I said, "You guys take your shoes off. We're not going to play." And they said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, they're going to be undefeated." I said, "No sense you getting all sweaty." So, but I said, "If you want to play, get your shoes back on." And we went out and we were ahead 4 points with about 2 minutes to go, and there was a foul. And I had one big kid, and he caught the ball, and the guy run into him, and of course the coach from their team jumped up and yelled, "There's a foul on us," and he called a foul on my big player, and I got a little upset, and I went out there, and he's holding the ball at the free throw line, the official, and I went out and I chopped it, and I punted to the top of the Triton gym, and that got me a technical. And I called timeout, and I said, "Now if he misses these free throws, we'll steal the ball and hold it." And that kind of what happened. We ended up beating him, and I walked over to Rhodes and I said, "I guess you'll have to wait till next year, Rhodes." And I walked away. I wasn't real popular about that, but anyway, that's one thing that happened. And then I'll tell you one more story. When I was we were playing the B team game at Concord football, and Verl Whitehead, he was a pretty big fella. I think it was him, and they kept holding our end, and I kept saying, "They're holding our end." And he reached for his flag, but he wouldn't pull it. So finally I charged out there and bounced off of him, and he threw his flag, so I kicked it over the fence, and the other guy threw his flag, so I threw it over the fence. Third guy dropped his, picked it up. They marched off 45 yards, and they had a little huddle, and they said, "Go get on the bus." So I went out, crawled up on the bus, and was yelling, and they come over and said, "Get in the bus." And I said, "You said get on the bus." so they said, "If you don't, the game's over." So I got in the bus. But Herb Evelyn, the art teacher, he drew cartoons. I got these framed at home. One of them's, of course, blowing the nose, the other kicking the ball, and the other me sitting on the bus with a sign that says, "Officials 3, Snyder 0." So I used to get a little hot once in a while, but I got over it real quick after the game was over. But yeah, those are some interesting things that happened.
I'll have to see those pictures.
I'll bring them in and show
Yeah,
them
I'll
to
have
you.
to see those. Was that your only technical, or were you?
No, I'd had a few technicals. I didn't get too many. I got one for asking the guy at Columbia City, the official, where he banked, because he kept not calling. I thought he wasn't calling plays. He looked at me and I said, "Where do you bank?" "Anywhere, Columbia City," and he threw the flag up. I got a few others, I
You
think.
probably deserve that one.
Yeah, it was worth it. Anyhow.
So they have the basketball state runner-up in 04 and 05. What do you remember? Kind of the story of what happened there.
Well, I remember the one year when we had the game won, and the kid from Washington Township played at Notre Dame. I'm trying to think of his name. Fired in a long shot with just a couple seconds to go. We were up 1 and got beat, and that was a heartbreaker. I remember the championship football game when we were down there. It was freezing, and well, in the semi-state, I think it was, they had a kid from Delphi had never fumbled. He fumbled the ball. We got it back and scored right at the end, and so we won that game. And then in the final game in football, we were down there and we were playing. See, who'd we play that? I'm trying to think. I know as well. I can't remember now for some reason. Oh. Anyway, in that ball game, we got the ball back and won that. I called a play in that game because their back was going the other way and so on. And I told Nixon, I said, "I know this will work." And the back didn't go that way and almost got intercepted. I was looking for a place to hide. And anyway, we ended up winning that game. But those games, it just seemed like we were supposed to win. Things would happen right at the end, and we get the ball back, and we were very fortunate. Jasper's who we beat. They had a kid that was really good, and Buchanan. Of course, we had Buchanan. He was big and strong, and he was a big factor. But all the kids, we had some real good linemen. Samuelson comes to mind. He was real quick, and was a real good blocker. We had Joe Morrison was a good running back we had, and just had a bunch of good kids. One game I remember, we played Columbia City, and every year it seemed like we would beat them. And we were over there, and we didn't have much time to go, and we had a play called quarterback throwback. And we had like 40-some yards to go and not much time. And I told Nix, I said, let's run quarterback throwback. And we ran it and scored right at the end. And their athletic director come over, Nixon started to shake his hand, and he slapped it away. Said, you guys are just lucky or something like that. Well, we went to get on the bus, and we started to leave, and somebody had propped nails up against our tires. And when we started to leave, all the tires went flat. We had to wait an hour for another bus to come take us home. I remember that happening. That was not a good time, but anyway, yeah, those are some things that happened that was kind of interesting.
So you probably had a lot of rivalries, right? Can you think of?
Yeah. Well, Warsaw was a big one. They came over one year and burned a W in our field when we moved to the new field with the gasoline. I remember that. And then we played Rochester, and they was ahead of us with about 2 or 3 minutes to go. We had Rudd and that bunch, and Buchanan was a sophomore, I think. And our quarterback was real fast, and we scored a touchdown, and then we did 2 onside kicks, and we were down 2 touchdowns, and we scored 2 touchdowns. A lot of people went home, thought the game was over, and we scored 2 touchdowns and we had 2 onside kicks and got them back, and then Rudd kicked a extra point. It didn't count, and then we backed up. He kicked another, and we ended up beating them by 1. And they had a real good back that year, and but we ended up beating them. That was a real exciting game. After that, everybody was out in the field hugging each other and everything. You know, it was one of those deals. But yeah, they're in football. I think we were 20-1 in one stretch, so we had a real good bunch. I know we played not Concord. We played. Let's see who. Gee, my mind's going blank on me here, but we won one game 7-6 in the rain, and Buchanan scored with hardly any time to go, and it was on our home field over here. Wawasee, we beat Wawasee 7-6, and that was a year we won the state too. So we had a lot of close games, and we were pretty fortunate to come out of them, you know. One thing that I was proud of, we won the South Bend City tournament, B-team tournament 2 years in a row. And I got a real nice note from their athletic director. He said, evidently, you guys don't read our press clippings, because they had some real good kids. And we were fortunate to win that too, both years. We got to play at the ACC in the final game. And the kids just done an outstanding job. And that was a kind of a highlight for me to win those back-to-back. I had pictures made and framed for all the kids, and gave them all a picture, and copied the letter and put it in a thing and gave it to them. Yeah. And that was pretty neat thing to play at Notre Dame for the kids, you know. So, yeah.
How did they feel when they walked in?
Well,
the basketball court.
Yeah, they really felt good. I know that I used to start a different kid. Like if your grandma and grandpa was coming from a distance, I would start a kid and let him play a whole quarter if he didn't mess up. But I had a regular starting 5 for the most of the games. But I would, for special times, I would let special kids play. You know, and we'd won the Bi-County B team when I was at LaVille, and the next day we went down to Argos. Of course, we went down to Argos. Why? I started a couple of kids that hadn't got a start all year, and we barely beat them. We beat them pretty good originally, and then somebody come up to me and asked me what I was doing, one of the parents. And I told them, and they didn't think it was a good idea, and I told them I didn't care if they thought it was a good idea or not. One time I resigned on a brown paper sack at LaVille and threw it and hit one of the board members. we were playing pin. This is 8th grade, and they were undefeated, and we were undefeated. And I had a kid named Workman, and he'd traveled a couple times. And I was about to take him out, and some guys up there yelled, "Take Workman out." And I thought, well, I'm not taking Workman out, because then they'll think they're running things. So I left him in, and he ended up traveling. We got beat by 1 point. And so afterward, I came down, and somebody left the ball out on the floor, so I went out to get it. We only had one new basketball. And they come down there and started questioning me, so I picked up a popcorn sack and resigned on it and threw it. And then I went home. It was Christmas time. And then the superintendent called me and said something about me not, finishing the year. So I wanted to do it anyway, so I said, yeah, I'll come back. But I didn't want to hear anything from anybody. So once in a while I did some stupid things like everybody else,
You got your point across, though, right?
Yeah. It's one of those object lessons. Anyway, yeah.
So they've got notes down here about some of the girls' basketball.
Well, the Fox girl, I had her in school, and she was the girls' basketball coach at Plymouth, and they were playing in the regional. And I went over, my players went over there, we went over there to support them. And she's having a trouble beating a zone, so I went down and they called timeout, and I drew up a thing. And she come back and won. And when we left, a bunch of people come out there and were yelling at us. And one of the things they said was, "Where do you farmers keep your tractors?" And one of the kids said, "We move them outside so we can practice in the barn." But I remember her doing pretty well, and I'd had her in school at LaVille, the Fox girl. She's a good gal. And but anyway, yeah, I helped a little bit, some with the girls' basketball, but not really much. My son was dating a girl from LaVille, so we followed the LaVille girls' basketball, and they had done pretty well. But as far as girls' basketball, I didn't have a whole lot to do with it. I helped a little bit with Mr. Cox's wife when she was having. I went with her over to Goshen, and they were playing in the tournament, and I helped her with this offense, and we were ahead at halftime by 10, and they came out and went out of the zone and started after us, and we got shots, but they weren't falling, and some guys started giving me a bunch of mouths from up behind, and then something happened, and she threw her clipboard, and she got a technical, and they hit and scored again. They got ahead, and they ended up beating us, and on the way out, a bunch of guys were giving me, why don't you keep your nose out of people's business? I was just trying to help out a fellow teacher. So occasionally, you can get in trouble just trying to do the right thing, or what you think's right anyway.
Sounds like you had quite a bit of crowd interaction there. How it went.
Yeah, when I was at West, I went over to Tippecanoe, and we were playing. I had a kid who had dyslexia, and he's supposed to be guarding 43, and he kept going over and guarding 34, so 43 was open. So right at the end of the game, they shot the ball, and we were up one. The ball was rolling around the circle, and I went out kind of to look, see it was going in. And I looked around, I'm out in the middle of the floor, and it went in, and we got beat. And some guy from Tippecanoe yelled, of course they knew me from high school ball and all that, said, "Why don't you sit down, Snyder?" I turned around and looked up, and I said, "Sounds like a good idea." I went over and sit down. Anyway, yeah. I used to take the kids on a 3-day canoe trip, the whole ball club. We'd go down to Monterey and rent John boats. And we'd start out on Road 110 and float down the river through Tippecanoe, and we'd stay on an island down by Telma overnight. Then we go on down and stay by Rochester. Then the third day we'd get in, and kids love doing that. That was a lot of fun. And
That sounds fun.
when we get down by Warsaw, we'd wrap our paddles up, and then, or by not Warsaw, by Rochester, I should say. It was real shallow there, sandy, and we would do gauntlets at each other and try and knock each other out of the boat and stuff like things you do today you could probably get arrested for, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But we did all that kind of stuff, yeah. Had a lot of fun doing that. And when Skiles was a freshman, I'll tell you another story on Skiles. I took him all canoeing, and he was gonna dump me. And I got a hold of him, held him under the water. I almost drowned anyway.
They won a state championship, right?
Yeah, right, 82. 81, they got beat by, I think they got beat by LaVille in 81. LaVille beat his group as a sophomore. My son was playing at LaVille. I'd come to school and they got on me because LaVille beat him like it was my fault or something. But anyway, yeah, their sophomore year, LaVille beat them. In regular season, I know, and then their junior year, I think LaVille beat them. And then Argos ended up beating LaVille in the final game in the sectional. Then the senior year, they went all the way through the tournament, and then they, of course, they got all the way down that year. But yeah, that was his senior year that they won. I think they might have lost one game that year. I can't remember for sure, but I'll tell you a story about Skiles, how he got recruited. The guy from Michigan State came down to look at a kid from Fort Wayne Harding. My brother-in-law was a coach at Fort Wayne Harding, and they came to see this kid that ended up at Indiana State. McCombs was his name, and they watched Skiles, and there again, we were lucky in that game because I think we were playing Marion and there was ice underneath the floor and the kids slid a little bit. And they called travel line. We got the ball back and beat them. And so when they was getting ready to go back to Michigan State, the head coach said, just a minute, let's go back and watch that chubby little guard, Skiles. And they watched him and he decided he wanted Skiles, and that's how he ended up at Michigan State, yeah.
So were you down at the game?
Oh yeah, I went to all the games and
So what do you
watched
remember?
Skiles, and yeah, I just remember everything I remember about it was in fact my kids all wore shirts supporting, we all supported Plymouth, of course, after we got beat, but all I remember is the shot that Skiles shot. I've got the tapes at home. It looks like the ball curved in. What happened there, now again, you never know what's going to happen. They had that big guy he was 6'4" guard, and he's coming down the floor. He goes behind his back, and he travels. If he'd have laid the ball up, the game would have probably been out of reach. And then their great big kid got fouled with a little bit of time to go. And, I mean, a big, strong kid. He shoots the free throw and doesn't even get to the basket. And that's how we got the ball back in the final game. And then we get the ball and they throw it to Skiles and he goes down the side and he fires it from the right side. I'll never forget, I was sitting up there and that thing's not going in and it just looked like it curved, and that's how we got in the overtime and won. Yeah, Skiles he did some amazing things. He was quite a ball player. But Sissel blocked the shot right toward the end. That could have cost us the ball game. And everybody contributed. And those kids, that was an amazing year. But that's what I remember about the last game. Here again, we were fortunate to win that ball game. And Jack was real good strategy-wise. Jack could always, he worked at stuff. I mean, he had everything planned, and he had something for like at the last second of the game, if you're behind, or if this happens, you're going to do this. So Jack was a really good strategist. He did a great job with those kids. Yeah.
He had it all planned out.
Yeah, it all panned out. Everybody that's won a state championship has to look back and see how fortunate they were to get there, you know, and to win it. That's the way it was in football. That's the way it was in basketball. And yeah, you know, like when we won that South Bend tournament, the Beaker boy, Bill, he didn't play that much. And my center fouled out. And he went in there and got 11 points. And I never dreamed he would have done it. He was kind of slow. And those kids from South Bend were quick and could jump. And they almost overreacted to him, it seemed like to me. But he did a great job and hadn't played that much. And so, you know, things like that, you're just fortunate.
Yeah, takes a little bit of luck. So it looks like in 77, 78, the football team, undefeated season. Overtime game, 3 overtimes.
What's that?
3 overtimes in the championship game?
Yeah.
That sounds like a fun.
They had a kid named Tony Aarons that was a real good runner. And him and Skiles, or not Skiles, Buchanan were just about even. But Buchanan, I always thought Buchanan was a little bigger and stronger. And I thought there again, in that game, we had a kid that played some defensive back and some linebacker. And I thought I had him in a defensive back, and Nick's had him in a linebacker, and we were missing a player. And for some reason, he dropped back and batted the ball down. There again, that could have been a touchdown. I mean, you look back and just think of all the things that could have happened, you know. And yeah, we were here again. You don't know why it happened. It just seemed like it's supposed to happen, I guess.
So who was that last game against?
That game was against Jasper, and that's the one that had that errant. And one of our ball players was the line coach down at Jasper. And for the game, he brought those kids down to intimidate us, but it didn't work.
So 3 overtimes.
3 overtimes, yeah. Every overtime you could have gotten beat. It's just, you know, one of those things, yeah.
So what was the last play that they won it on?
The last play that we ran was Buchanan, of course, and scored. And then right at the end is when they threw the ball and we knocked it down. And that there again, like I said, the game could have gone either way. Yeah.
So you only had 10 players on the field on the last play?
We only had 10 players. I don't know if it was the last play or the play just before that. I'm trying to remember now, but yeah, that happened, and it was the Eads. It was the Eads boy that was supposed to, and he, for some reason, he got back where he belonged, and that happened. So it would have been my fault, to be honest with you, because which wouldn't have been good. I would have probably had to walk home.
He saved you then, huh?
Yeah. You probably heard the story about us, West High beating Argos. Yeah,
let's hear it.
What happened there was my brother played for Argos, but the coach didn't play him in that game for some reason. I think I never knew why. But anyway, in that game, we were behind with about 10 seconds to go. And I told the kids, I said, if you guys beat Argos, I'll dribble the ball to Plymouth to Snyder Drive and buy you all pizza. Well, supposedly we were going to get beat by Argos. And I told them a story that when I played at Manchester, we had a kid that, in the national finals, a black kid that there wasn't much time to go, and the coach was yelling at him. He was walking down the floor, and all of a sudden he turned around and come back, stole the ball, and scored. And in that game, Johnson, I think he was a sophomore, and he started walking down the floor, and I was yelling at him. He turned around, come back, stole the ball, shot from the top of the key, and we beat him by 1 point. So evidently, he sort of had that in his mind for some reason. So I don't take any credit for that win. I give it all to him. And as soon as that game was over, they went and got my tennis shoes and brought them to me. So I remember it was rainy and cold out that night, and I had to dribble all the way to town and buy him a pizza. So yeah, that was and then that's when the next day, of course, they hung Doc Fod. I see a picture over there where they shows that, but anyway, yeah, that was a fun time.
How long did it take you to walk?
I don't know, I forget, I think it was like about 37 minutes or something like that. It was a little over 4 miles. I think it was something like that, but I can't remember for sure. I know about a week later I got it in the back and could hardly stand up. I do know that.
So was that the last time you made a bet with your team?
No, I'd done that to other teams, but it didn't work out. So yeah, it just didn't work out.
So did you have a whole group of people walking with you?
Well, no, nobody walked with me, but there was a line of cars behind us, and they all followed us in and blowing their horns and all that kind of stuff, you know. Yeah. Showed up I think he had the pizza place full that night, so yeah.
Yeah, that's a good story. Why don't you tell me a little bit about Doc Fod?
Well, Doc Fod, I don't think I'm supposed to tell his name. I knew who he was, but yeah, Doc Fod, every week what he would do is predict, you know, what would happen, and he's the one that started the crying towel too for the coaches. And yeah, I remember him visiting with him different times. But yeah, every week he would predict who would win and by about how much and so on. Most of the time he was right, the original Doc Fod. At the end, I think Mike Boyce was playing Doc Fod, but I'm not sure. But that was always a fun thing to get the paper out and look at it and then compare what he did or didn't do, you know, if he's right or not. And he was right, I suppose, probably 80% of the time, you know. But, yeah. But I remember Doc Fod.
So everybody knew who he was, but nobody ever...
Well, supposedly nobody knew who he was, but yeah, I knew, I mean, coaches pretty much knew who he was, you know. One of the sports writers here, yeah.
So when you got back, they had hung an effigy of Doc Fod?
Well, the next morning at school, somebody brought in a dummy, and the principal called everybody to the gym. We all went down there, and they gave the cheerleaders a rose and introduced all the boys, you know, and all that stuff. Yeah, it was a fun time. We pretty much partied that day, and rather than being now today they probably wouldn't allow you to do that and so on. But anyway, yeah. So I better not tell you this story about Buchanan. Might get in trouble. Anyhow, Buchanan didn't get to go with us to the warm-up in basketball at Elkhart. We were playing at LaVille in the final game, and he fouled out, and he got mad, said something he shouldn't have said. So we got back there. We had a guy named Kirby Lane who was assistant principal, and I don't know if he didn't like ball players or what, but he was always looking around. And so he said that Buchanan couldn't play in the regional because he had gotten upset at the sectional. So I went in and talked to the principal. I said, that's ridiculous, you know. I said, he's just a kid. He was a sophomore, I think, maybe, I'm not sure. And he said, what can we do? I said, well, leave him home Friday. He doesn't get to go with the kids over there and go out and eat and so on. So I went to Pete and told him, and he said, my dad's going to kill me. I said, don't worry about your dad. So I called up his dad, Kay, and I said, hey, look, we need Pete. I said, he's going to come home and tell you something, but don't get all upset. I said, just tell him that you understand and he shouldn't have done it. Dad said, okay. So then Pete comes to me and he says, what am I going to tell the kids? I said, Pete, you're 6'3" and 200 pounds. I said, you don't have to tell them nothing. He said, okay. so he didn't get to go, but then he went with us over there to the regional end. That's what you got to do behind the scenes sometimes, you know what I mean? Yeah, you got to work out things sometimes between parents and kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll bet. Yeah.
Yeah, I had a kid, I won't tell you his name, but I had a kid that was a real good shooter. And this is on the B team, and he had a little law. A lot of times kids will start pressing themselves. And so I'm sitting in the crowd, and this kid's dad's with another dad whose kid's on the varsity, and he's supposed to be a big star. So his dad tells this kid's dad that Snyder's putting too much pressure on him. He doesn't let him shoot. So the kid come to me and told me, and so I went to the dad, and I said, look, I said, I haven't put any pressure on him at all. I said, the problem is you guys are popping off to him. I said, just leave him alone, he'll be all right. He told them to shut up, leave me alone, or something like that. So then about a couple games later, he got back in the groove, started doing everything well. Well, then after that, I had a real good relationship with his dad and so on. But yeah, sometimes you just gotta go talk to people, you know. I've gone and talked to kids into playing ball that didn't want to, they didn't think they was good enough or something, and then they turned out being, you know, doing well for you and so on. But certain kids that perceive things different, but they're kids. I don't know if you've seen this, but just like his kid that won the Heisman Trophy, he said something way back when he's 14. A kid's brain hadn't developed at 14. How many of us haven't done stupid things when we're 14? So sometimes you gotta, you know, people wanna crucify everybody else, but then they wanna make excuses for their own kid. You know what I'm saying? So I spent a lot of time with parents and so on, just, you know, working things out with the kids and the parents. But if you don't work things out with people, then everybody's always in an uproar, you know what I mean? So I went to the source, and if they didn't like me, that was fine, I didn't care. You know, I have kids tell me, I don't like you, and I say, look, I'm 50 years old, I got a lot of friends my own age, I don't really need you. Understand?
Yeah, I think managing you wouldn't think about it with sports, but there's a lot of emotions involved.
Oh yeah.
Managing,
Yeah.
you know, the parents and the kids, and you know, the community is really tied up in a lot of the sports too. So
yeah, I've had parents at my house come upset, you know, and I'd have them in, we sit down, talk it over, work it out, and let it go at that.
Well, so looking back over your career and your time there, what sticks out to you the most when you think of your time coaching and teaching?
Well, what I like the most is I have a lot of kids still write me or come and talk to me, you know, or get a hold of me, and I had a kid stop at my garage sale. I was having a garage sale with my grandkids' toys and stuff I was getting rid of, and he come up, and Mr. Snyder, he come over there and we got to visit. He come up and hugged me, you know, and he talked to me, and he wasn't a ball player or anything, but what I like is, as you look back over your life, how many people you helped, you know. And, you know, you like to win, but some of the kids I was the closest to and like as much as I do anybody, they didn't win at all. They were, you know, but they tried and they did their best. And I think the best thing about being a teacher is the relationships you form with your colleagues, and eventually even with other coaches that you coached against. You get together, you know, and talk things. But yeah, things like when I was at West High, I was coaching there, and Bourbon was real good in basketball, and Campbell was a coach, and he said, and he knew that I played a lot of basketball, and he said, I need a guard, come over and play against my kids. So I went over there and practiced against his kids, because they had a guard that kind of played like I did, and Dick was a great guy, and he did a real good job, and he became athletic director over at Northwood eventually. But yeah, relationships, you know, like that, and just that's what I remember most, and what I like most about it. The other day, my wife said, we got to start getting rid of stuff. I went down there and I had a box full of letters and stuff I had from kids. Well, I want to throw them out, but I can't. You know what I'm saying? And I got in there and started looking through the picture, you know, stuff and all that, reading them. And so that's the thing I remember most. I had a very enjoyable life. And I would do everything the same again if I had to. Yeah, that's about it.
A great place to be, right?